Someone the other day was disagreeing with what I said in a video in a comment and used the fact that I wear my hat backwards as a way to prove that I'm dumb. Like, no, it's just if I wear it forwards, it messes up the green screen and I'm not fixing my hair every day. Sorry. All right, welcome back everybody. My name is Tucker and today's video was kind of the start of a little bit of a mini series on the channel in which I'm going to be going through some of the top teams in each conference and talking about how I think they could potentially win the championship. These are only top teams. I'm not going to be making a video about how the Pelicans could potentially win the championship or anything, but it might seem kind of easy at first, oh, this team's really good, of course they have a chance. But it's one thing to think that the team is good, and it's another to make a case and an argument about how they could potentially win the championship in a very tangible way. All right, so let's talk about the LA Lakers and their path to winning a championship this season. So first, let's lay out all of the pros and cons for this team, and then we'll talk about the actual case and the path, because I feel like it's a little bit easier and it makes a little bit more sense that way to have that base and then move forward with the conversation from there. So let's start off with the pro side. Let's be positive. Some good things about this Lakers team. First and foremost, they have the best two-man combination in the entire league in LeBron James and Anthony Davis. When healthy, assuming everybody in the league is healthy, these two guys are better than any other two-man combination in the entire league. And that's especially critical because this past offseason and this season as a whole has largely become defined by having a duo, having two guys. For the longest time, it was a big three, but now it seems as though it's a big two. Whether the fact that they haven't played this year is irrelevant. This is just related to last offseason, whether it's KD or Kyrie and Paul George and Kawhi Leonard or LeBron James and Anthony Davis. Whatever your two-man group is, no matter what, in my opinion, these two guys are the best. And if you're playing a given stretch of basketball and LeBron James and Anthony Davis are on the floor, assuming that shot making is even between the two teams and the other three guys play okay, you're going to win that stretch because those two guys are just that much better than any other two guys that a lot of other teams can put on the floor. And other than just what's happening with their team, there are some contextual things that are really good for them as it relates to them being a championship contender. They have a top 5 rating in both offense and defense throughout the regular season to this point, which is generally a very good indicator of a true championship contender. It seems as though they're going to have home court throughout the playoffs unless they run into Milwaukee in the finals. It seems like they have a pretty good handle on the 1 seed and having a better record than anybody in the East other than Milwaukee. And then when you look at the other teams in the Western Conference, there's really no other true contender that has a player on their roster that has a proven history of going on deep championship runs other than the Clippers and Kawhi Leonard, unless you want to count James Harden and the Rockets in there, which I'm not sure that you do, but if you want to, you could make that case. But as you look up and down the true threats in the West, the Lakers have a guy in LeBron James, obviously, that's won multiple championships, that knows what it's like to push deep into the postseason and go on a really long postseason run. And other than the Clippers and Kawhi, nobody else really has that. But getting back to the basketball stuff for a moment in terms of pros, they also have one thing up their sleeve that they've been kind of saving, right? They save it for the end of games and they're saving it for the postseason, and that is Anthony Davis playing as a true 5-man. They pull it out in the last 5 minutes or so of close games. They used it yesterday in the Celtics game, and they're going to use it more in the postseason. Right now in the regular season, they're playing two bigs a little bit more often than they would in the postseason. Not that they're going to completely abandon that strategy, but once we get towards the playoffs, that's definitely their more ideal lineup in terms of spacing, and they still have that to unleash, to unlock another level of this team over what has already been a very dominant team to this point in the regular season. All right, now let's move over to some negatives. So there's an important distinction to be made with this Lakers team because I think very often people consider this team to have good depth, or at least better depth than they thought they would coming into this season. My counter argument to that would be having depth and having options are two different things. Having depth means no matter who you put out there, you feel like you have a good matchup against any given team, and you feel like whoever you put out there is at least going to perform at an average level, and a lot of times are going to do better than average, right? Like, you don't feel bad ever about putting someone in. That means you have good depth, and there are teams around the league that have good depth. The Lakers, on the other hand, it feels more like they have options, right? Like, they certainly have plenty of guys they can put out there as the other three around LeBron and AD, whether it's any of their bigs, JaVale and Dwight, whether it's Alex Caruso or Kyle Kuzma or KCP or Rajon Rondo or Danny Green. They have options, but the difference is how confident are you that any of those three guys are really going to perform well in the minutes that you give them on a given night? Certainly sometimes they will, but you're not 100% confident like you would be with a team that has true, legitimate depth. So it's more about trying to find out who has the hot hand, who really has it that night. And on some nights, none of those guys are going to have it, which makes the burden on AD and LeBron especially big. So that's an important distinction in terms of a negative for this team. Now, related to that, a lot of what's going to happen with this Lakers team in the postseason this year and throughout this LeBron AD era is going to come down to one question. Do you think that the other three players in a Lakers uniform on the court matter at all when AD and LeBron are on the court with those guys? Do you think that matters? Do you think that has any impact on their ability to win or lose the game? Because there's definitely an argument to be made that as long as you put out a couple of the guys that they have on their roster and they're just not awful, they're going to be able to still be extremely, extremely good because AD and LeBron are on the floor. Now, if you think those other three guys matter, there are certainly some negatives to look at, like I talked about in the previous section. There are going to be situations in the postseason where they're going to need someone like KCP or someone like Caruso or Danny Green or Kyle Kuzma to make a big shot or a couple of big shots because teams are focusing so much on Anthony Davis and on LeBron James, and your confidence in those guys to make those kinds of shots in the postseason probably has a lot to do with how confident you are in this team actually winning the championship. Which brings me to my last and probably most concerning thing about this Lakers team, and that is their three-point shot making ability. There are players on this roster, specifically Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, that are having good shooting seasons, and they have a lot of guys that do space the floor well for them in terms of the volume of their attempts, but they don't necessarily have a ton of really good shooters on their roster. Now, to their credit, they're not forcing them. They're doing what works for them, right? They're attacking the rim. They're punishing teams inside with Anthony Davis. But the other guys outside of LeBron and AD, there are definitely some question marks in terms of shooting. So this season, to this point in the regular season, the Lakers are 19th in three-pointers made, 23rd in three-pointers attempted per game, and 14th in three-point percentage. The reason that this is critical is that generally over the last 5 years, these three categories are a good indicator of teams that are going to make the finals. So here's what I mean. I went back and I looked at the last 5 NBA finals and the teams' rankings in each of those three categories. Whether they won or lost in the finals is irrelevant. It's about whether or not they made it. And the lowest that any team placed in any of these categories were the 2018 Warriors, which were 17th in three-point attempts, and the 2019 Raptors, which were 11th in three-point attempts. Everything else is inside of the top 10 and a lot of times inside of the top 5 in terms of three-point volume, three-point makes, as well as three-point percentage. Now, there are certainly arguments to be made there that the Warriors are there a ton and the Cavs are there a ton and those teams shot a ton of threes. There's also an argument to be made that maybe this is a bit of a prerequisite in the modern NBA to being a really good postseason team, is having a team that takes a lot of threes, makes a lot of threes, and hits them at a high percentage. And when you contrast those numbers that I just showed to the rankings of this Lakers team, it starts to look a little bit concerning. Now, certainly you can change that around, and when you get to the postseason and you're playing AD at the 5 more, the volume could increase, as would the percentage. That's certainly an argument, but if you're looking strictly at positive and negatives for this Lakers team, I do think that the three-point shooting categories could potentially be an issue when we get to the postseason as it relates to all these other teams that have made the finals in the last 5 years. All right, so now with the pros and cons laid out, let's talk about the actual path for this Lakers team. What would it look like if they got to the finals and they won the championship? Well, the first thing that I think is important to note, and I kind of touched on a little bit earlier, there's a scenario in which their path to the finals isn't actually as difficult as maybe we're making it out to be. The West is a tough conference, but when you're looking at it from an individual team standpoint, it's not necessarily true that all of these teams are going to give the Lakers issues just because the West does have a lot of good teams. So when you're looking at it, you have teams like Denver and Utah that have never been there before. Certainly this could be the year that they make a leap, but they've never been there before. They've never been in a conference final situation, and maybe they're still a little bit too young, right, to be making this kind of leap and to be challenging a team as good and as veteran-laden as the Lakers in the postseason. You've got other teams that maybe just won't be able to figure it out, right? Like maybe the Clippers and the Rockets just won't be able to figure out whatever they need to. It just won't click for them this year, and they won't be as much of a contest for the Lakers in the postseason either. And then you got other teams that maybe you could talk yourself into being really dangerous in the postseason, like the Mavs or the Thunder, but again, they're probably still a year away, right? So when you look at it that way, maybe their path to the finals won't be as difficult, especially considering they're going to have home court. And then once they get there, maybe they're not playing Milwaukee, maybe a team like Boston or Toronto or Philadelphia or the Heat. ends up upsetting the Bucks on their way to the finals. And then the Lakers have home court in that series as well, and they don't have to deal with Giannis, who I think is going to be an issue for any team, but especially the Lakers given their general lack of size on the perimeter, not so much in the front court with LeBron and Kuzma and AD and McGee. So in addition to that road to the finals maybe not being as difficult as you would initially think, this would also be a team that if they won the championship got incredible consistency from the other guys, right? Like, you know what you're going to get from Anthony Davis, you know what you're going to get from LeBron James, but the other guys, the Carusos, the KCPs, the Greens, the Kuzmas, step up their consistency, and they're really good throughout the postseason and maybe surprise a couple of people with how good they are during the postseason, specifically as it relates to shot making. When they really need a shot, when teams are really keying in on the LeBron AD pick and roll or the AD post up or the LeBron post up, when they kick it out to Caruso, when they kick it out to Danny Green, when they kick it out to Kyle Kuzma, those guys are making those shots more often than not, and they're having a really nice stretch of consistency shooting wise, or they just get really hot throughout the postseason from 3-point range, and that makes them that much more difficult of an offensive team. I think both of those scenarios are absolutely realistic. And then at the end of the day, the other teams just can't handle the LeBron James, Anthony Davis combination as AD plays at the 5 more, and as both of those guys play even more minutes when we get to the postseason and in close games, and LeBron James does his LeBron James thing with his championship experience and the ability to slow the game down late and really control everything in true elimination type games, right? That's always going to be an advantage for them in any series, with the exception of potentially against Kawhi, because I think he's probably the best playoff closer in the game at the moment. So that would be the path. As I've said in the past, this isn't necessarily the team that I'm taking. I still think the Clippers have the best chance to win the championship this year, and I just put out that video. But this would be the path for the Lakers, and they certainly have everything that they need right now, because the shooting stuff, like I said, you can flip a switch on that. You can just get hot over a certain stretch, and that'll probably improve with AD at the 5 as well. And there's a lot of good signs for this team. Even though I don't think that they're going to win it, there's absolutely an argument to be made for the LA Lakers to win the NBA championship this season. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.